Good afternoon, distinguished guests, members of the Economic Students Association of Kenya, KESA, students from other visiting universities and MMU, staff, and faculty members. Our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rosbella Maranga, who could not be with us today, and the entire Multimedia University of Kenya community, I extend a warm welcome to you all to Multimedia University for the third National Economic Summit. Hebu jipigeni makofi. Allow me to recognize and express our gratitude to the distinguished guests and partners whose presence and support have been instrumental in making this summit a reality. This event, organized by the Economic Student Association of Kenya, KESA, is a collaboration with our esteemed partners, build upon the foundation laid by the previous editions held at Catholic University of East Africa and Mount Kenya University in Thika. Watu wa Mount Kenya mko wapi? Watu wa Catholic University mko wapi? Hala? Hata kama ni mmoja wa Kongo, piga makofi. Today, we convene to deliberate on the theme of profound significance. Three things: building a climate-smart, people-centered, and sustainable economy for all. This theme resonates with our collective mission of to foster an economy that harmoniously integrates environmental sustainability with human development. You are talking of climate-smart initiatives. The urgency of climate change necessitates the adoption of the innovative climate-smart solutions. This involves integrating sustainable practices across all sectors of the economy, from agriculture and energy to manufacturing and services. By embracing renewable energy sources, of which I am a champion, promoting energy efficiency, of which I teach that at PhD and Masters, and supporting green technology. When we are building our houses, tunataka tuwe na light from outside kwa wingi. The library which you have seen there is a typical example. Can reduce our carbon footprint and build on a more resilient future. The second part is people-centered development. A truly sustainable economy places people at its heart. This means ensuring that the economic policies are inclusive, equitable, and designed to uplift all members of the society. Access to quality education, healthcare, employment opportunities are the fundamental rights that must be upheld. By investing in human capital, and fostering equity, a social equity, we lay the foundation for lasting prosperity. The role of academia. As an academic institution, Multimedia University of Kenya is dedicated to advancing knowledge and nurturing the next generation of leaders. You must be aspiring to take over from me. We are committed to research and innovation that contribute to sustainable development and to equip our students with the skills and values necessary to lead an ever-evolving world. In closing, I encourage each one of you to engage in discussions and activities of this summit. Msio mnasikiliza tu peke yake na nyinyi mna contribute. Let us challenge conventional thinking. If you have been cooking ugali with a pot, tujaribu kutengeneza ugali wa nyasi na sufuria. Explore new ideas. Forge partnership. That's why I talked about social capital. People-centered and sustainable economy. Thank you.
We don't until they get to see being a professor is not easy. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, now, right now, I'm very careful with how I see individuals. So right now I have to, thank Dr. Engineer. Thank you so much. Thank you for the sentiment. So ladies and gentlemen, before any waste of time, amazing afternoon of our chief as his address, who I introduced beforehand. Welcome none other than Professor Robert Mugenda. Amazing. Let's give him some standing ovation. Let's give him some standing ovation. Keep on clapping. Keep on clapping. Keep on clapping. Keep on amazing people. You can do better than that. You Thank you so much. Thank you.
As well. Yes. Yeah, good morning. It is really a tremendous pleasure this afternoon. And I must say that as soon as I walked through the gates of the university, I felt at home. I was with the university for 17 years before I joined the Central Bank. So 6 years at Nairobi, 7 years at Strathmore University. Not able to make it in person of events. We spoke and I said it's very important that he be represented, at least we engage with the community and particularly with the economic association. So that is how we're here this morning. And I thought, just to make it a little bit interesting, talk a little bit about the central bank and what the central bank does, and more in the context of last, let's say, 3-4 years, because we've been through very interesting times globally, how we came in, to deal with some of the economic challenges that over the last few years. Second part of the decade, because it's the event is organized by the economists. I'll talk a little bit about profession and how, as students, you can economics, you prepare yourself better. Any opportunities, both locally and globally, that they are in the economic world. Does that sound interesting? Yeah, so I thought that's the way I'll structure it. Instead of just talking about the economy broadly, I thought also just to have a segment dealing particularly with the career of economics and how, as young aspiring economists, you can enhance your opportunities basically in this particular field. So the central bank basically it derives its basis and mandate, central mandate, from Article 231 of the Constitution and Section 4 and Section 4A of the CBK Act. And the main sort of core mandate is formulation of monetary policy with a view to ensuring price stability. That's the core reason why the central bank is there. Yeah, and then now after that, now you have accompanying objectives which are also important, like ensuring stability in the financial sector, ensuring exchange rate stability, ensuring a smooth payment system, and then contributing to other government objectives like growth, for example. But the core thing is price stability. That's what we focus on. And generally, when there are challenges in price stability, all the energy is focused there until that is dealt with. And then now we're able to now sort of consider also other critical objectives. So just to mention a little bit of that, we have a monetary policy committee. That's how this is actually operationalized. So the monetary policy committee meets every 2 months, and we met early February, around February 5th. We met, and we're on an easing cycle. So the central bank rate was eased again. And also we actually lowered the cash reserve ratio as well in this last meeting. Then at the beginning of April, we have another meeting as well. There are 8 members of the Monetary Policy Committee. So 4 internal members. Governor is the chair of the Monetary Policy Committee. Then Deputy Governor is the vice chair. And then we have 2 other internal members, Director Financial Markets and myself, Director Research, who sit on the internal side. Then we have 4 external members who are usually appointed to 3-year terms with the possibility of renewal. So we just appoint some new members who are just appointed, external members. 4 of them were just appointed in November last year. So basically the Monetary Policy Committee is how this mandate is kind of carried out. And then we also have monetary policy operations where every week we basically meet to look at the level of liquidity in the system. We have a monetary policy framework where basically the interbank rate is supposed to track the central bank rate. So when we make a decision on the central bank rate, then we have weekly monetary policy operations varying the level of liquidity in the banking system to ensure this tracking between the two. And we've had that system now for almost 2 years. It's part of a system called inflation targeting, which is applied by many central banks around the world, where you have an inflation target and you work towards that inflation target. Ours, as you know, comes from the National Treasury. So every year, National Treasury gives us a target. The last few years, it's been 5% plus or minus 2.5%. Just to mention very briefly, we came from a situation where October 2022, the inflation rate rose as high as 9.6%. 9.6%, way outside the target. Because we had a number of shocks, the Ukraine war, etc., and a number of global shocks at the same time as well. The exchange rate was depreciating. So we had to take over almost a 2-year period between May 2022 and February last year, February 2024. We tightened the central bank rate, raised the central bank rate by 600 basis points, over roughly a 2-year period to rein in inflation. Because when inflation is out of control, then that creates a lot of macroeconomic instability everywhere. So we managed to do that. So once inflation now re-entered the band and started stabilizing. In fact, if you've looked at the last few inflation outcomes, late last year we went as low as having headline inflation at something like 2.6%. That was the lowest, I think, in almost 20 years. And then now the last few months it's gone up slightly. 3.3% was the January outcome. Then you had 3%, the December outcome. Of course, you note that we collaborated with the National Bureau of Statistics to come up with new measures of inflation. The National Bureau of Statistics only used to report headline inflation, overall inflation. So after collaborating for, let's say, 6 months last year, we came up with, together with them, we came up with a new measure of core inflation. Before, the central bank used to estimate it, because in monetary policy you need to know roughly what the demand pressures are, so you need an estimate. But because KNBS is the official compiler of inflation data, we decided to work together with them, and now from end of January this year, they've been publishing a new measure of core inflation and non-core inflation. Yeah, basically it includes about 275 items out of a basket of 330 that go into the CPI. So those make up core inflation. So this new measure tracks the headline much more closely than, say, the previous one we had before. So just say there's been some innovation there in that space, and now when they report, even this month, they're expected to report tomorrow. When they release the inflation, they'll give you a headline figure, and then they'll say core inflation is this, and non-core inflation is this. So that is a great development, because all the major bureaus of statistics around the world always report core inflation as well. So we're very happy when actually they agreed to go in that direction, and started also items, etc., and just remain with the core ones, and then get a sense of what type of inflation you have with that. So that's been a very important recent development. So once we felt that inflation was now around the midpoint and started going below the midpoint of the target range, we basically started an easing cycle. We observed for a few months. So the last, let's say, increase of the rate was in February last year. Then we observed for a few months, and then now when we saw the inflation has stabilized, we actually now started easing in August last year. And since August, we've already eased by 225 basis points. So that also hoping to be able to influence average lending rates. For a number of reasons, sometimes the average lending rates don't decline very fast, but I think you've seen in the last month or so, they've been declining after conversations with the central bank, which I'm sure you followed. Now rates have actually started coming down, and so we're very happy about that. That's basically what the central bank does. These last few years have been extremely turbulent, not just for central banks in Africa, but for central banks globally, because you've had a lot of inflationary pressures, and you've had a situation in which in economics is kind of the most feared, what you fear the most, which is a combination of high inflation and low growth, what we call stagflation. Because standard tools are not designed to be able to deal easily with those problems. Usually the standard tools deal with one problem, then the other one kind of stays constant or gets worse. So when you have both problems at once, then you really struggle. So it was a real struggle for many central banks around the world. And also central banks are not their tools are not very well designed to deal with supply side shocks. So most of the shocks have been from the supply side, drought related, oil price hikes, things like that. So our tools are mostly demand management tools. So the only thing we can deal with when we have high inflation because of supply side shocks, we can't, for example, directly affect the price of oil or price of agricultural products. So the only thing you can deal with is the second round effects from that and try to kind of manage the expectations. Also, just mention a couple more things, and then I launch into the second part so that we have time for Q&A. The last year has been a very exciting year for us as well at the central bank because we managed to achieve stability in the exchange rate. You remember the year before last, there's a time the exchange rate had depreciated to 160 shillings against the dollar. Yeah, so we took a number of measures, confidence building measures. Can just mention a couple of them. One was that there was a lot of concern in financial markets last year whether the government would be able to pay a $2 billion Euro bond payout that was due in June last year. So the markets were very, very nervous. So what we did is last year in February, we had a liability management operation where we issued a Euro bond specifically to largely finance this Eurobond that was due in June, and that really calmed down the markets. Issued an infrastructure bond also that raised 4 times what it was aiming to raise. Half of it was foreign subscribers into the bond. That brought in a lot of forex. Of course, the tightening actions of monetary policy also helped. And then we did forex reforms. Basically, forex reforms that were aimed at enhancing price discovery. Price discovery in the market, a B-match system, where there was matching between buying and selling of foreign exchange and making the whole system more efficient. So all that contributed to stabilization of the exchange rate. For now, almost 9 months, it's been around 129, 130. And I mean, unless there are any major shocks, the exchange rate probably will not go too far away from there. Although, of course, it's market determined. It's a market determined exchange rate. So it can move around, but the central bank can come in sometimes to manage excess volatility of the exchange rate. So if you have chances of excess, then it can come in. But it seems to have stabilized. That rate of 129 seems to be a good rate for exporters and also a good rate for importers, 129, 130. Okay, and it's created a lot of certainty in the market as well. One other major achievement was at the beginning of last year, our foreign exchange reserves had dropped to about $6.5 billion. That's around 3.5 months of import cover. And we aim to have about 4 months of import cover. So what we did when the exchange rate stabilized, the central bank went into the market and started purchasing forex to build reserves, to build an adequate buffer of reserves. And we managed in a year, together with some support from IMF, but mostly purchasing from the market, to increase the reserves by 2.7 billion, actually in a 1-year period. So the reserves are now at about $9.3 billion, about 4.8 months of import cover, way above the minimum target of 4 months, way above the EAC convergence target of 4.5 months of import cover. So we're very comfortable in that regard. And that's also one factor that contributes to the stability of the exchange rate. When you have adequate reserves, then there's a sense that even if you have some shocks, temporary short-term shocks, the central bank has the capacity to be able to intervene and mitigate excess volatility. So I'd say those have been some of the highlights. Otherwise, the global economy is getting more and more difficult. Last year was quite a difficult year. The global economy was estimated to have grown at about 3.2%. This year, we expect about 3.3% growth, and next year also 3.3% growth. Kenya, the economy previous to 2024 figures haven't come out yet, but 2023, we grew at 5.6%. Initially, last year, we had projected 5.1. But as the year developed, it became clear it was going to be a very difficult year, growth-wise. So we revised our projection to 4.6% for last year. But KNBS will officially release the growth figures around April, end of April. They released the economic survey. But we knew already from the third quarter, when we had a third quarter growth of 4%, we knew it was going to be a very, very difficult year. So one of the other justifications for easing is that private sector credit growth really slowed down towards the end of last year. And I want to help promote private sector credit growth as well, so as to be able to spur economic growth, because right now inflation is under control. Yeah, so just saying from the macro stability side, particularly control of inflation, exchange rate stability, at least we can say that it's been, the last year was quite a good year, despite the global context being very difficult. It's become even more difficult this year now, with the possibility of trade wars and increased protectionism, tariffs, etc., etc. There's a lot of policy uncertainty globally. But in Kenya, we're quite optimistic. We're expecting a good year. We're projecting for this year growth of 5.3%. And we think that's still a conservative projection. On the external side, and I'll finish with that, that will be my part of just talking analytically about the economy. On the external side, last year we estimate that we had a current account deficit of 3.7% of GDP, driven by exports growth of about 15%, imports growth of about 10%. It was a much better year, in terms of export imports than the previous year, because the previous year we had negative growth in exports, negative growth in imports. So last year there was a recovery, but the highlight for us of the external sector was remittances. Kenya's remittances almost hit $5 billion. 2024 was a record year where we had remittances at $4.9 billion. Remittances from Kenya in the diaspora. Just to see how amazing that figure is, our exports for the year, goods exports, were around $8 billion. So remittances are already getting close to almost 60% of goods exports value. So that's been a major stabilizing factor, and it has been resilient through COVID, through difficult times. So that's been a major stabilizing factor as well. Good current account, healthy current account has also contributed to exchange rate stability. Otherwise, the financial sector is also stable. All the capital adequacy is well above the legal limits as well. Liquidity is well above the legal limits. So you can say low inflation, stable financial sector, stable exchange rate, fairly stable external sector. The major risk is on geopolitics, because at the moment the geopolitics is very, very volatile, and this is not helped by the fact of the current current uncertainty about trade policy, that we have, possibility of tariffs, etc. So that's the main risk that we have this year. So we're always analyzing what type of risks you have there. So just to say that those are always pillars we look at. We'll analyze the domestic economy, analyze the global economy, look at how the main trends are. We look at the external sector, we look at the real sector, look at inflation and growth projections, and then look at monetary aggregates and how monetary aggregates like money supply, private sector credit, etc., are evolving. Okay, so that's just to give a bit of analytical context on recent economic developments. Now, just to talk about being an invitation from the Economics Student Association, and I have a great love for this type of associations. When I was at Strathmore, I taught for 10 years, I pioneered, you could say, and taught for 10 years on the BBS Financial Economics. That was a flagship program that they had and still have. So I used to teach 2-3 courses a year, mostly macro and econometrics, and then I would teach on masters in public policy teaching within the university context. So with that, I developed a great love, let's say, for working with young people, and always very happy to be able to contribute any insights that that people are looking for. But some of the things I used to say when let's say when I was training young professional economists, and I guess maybe many of the ideas still remain valid. Some of course have been modified a bit because of some practical experience in the last few years. But I would say the core courses that make an economist is microeconomics, mathematical economics, and econometrics. Those ones, if you want to practice as a professional economist and you want to do further studies in economics, etc., those are the foundations. Then now the other things like monetary economics, international trade, and finance, etc., they build on those foundations. But those are always the core courses that you have to make sure that you have excellent mastery of. By excellent mastery, I don't only mean, let's say, doing well in your courses in terms of getting good grades. That is important, but I mean also develop a reading culture and passion for economics. Read books on areas that you're passionate about. I was very passionate about the international economics and financial economics space. So I'd read books by maybe previous central bank governors, Ben Bernanke, people like that, by famous economists, Stiglitz, and so on. Now there's a new trend towards behavioral economics, behavioral finance, etc. So use the university because you have a bit of time. When you get into the working world, there's very little time. So use your university time to develop a passion and, let's say, broad reading culture beyond the textbooks. Check what the latest books by famous economists, Paul Krugman, etc. Often we start from a nice starting point if you want. Just look at the Nobel Prize winners in economics of the last 20 years. Because economics is it's the only social science that has a Nobel Prize. So if you look at the winners of the last 20 years, then you see what they're working on. Like, for example, last year the Nobel Prize was won by Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson. Darren Acemoglu of MIT and James Robinson of Harvard. Already they're in the field of development economics, particularly institutions and how they shape economics. But already they had written a very famous book, popular book, about 10 years before, called Why Nations Fail. I'm sure it must have come up in some of your discussions and readings, Why Nations Fail, okay? Where they were looking at about 1,000 years of history and looking at what shapes societies. So depending on what your areas of interest are, look for popular, well-written books just to develop your passion and broaden your perspective, yeah? Be happy to recommend some specific titles also to your chairperson. The chairperson can write to me in case people are interested in other specific titles that would be good to read. Yeah, but I would say that's a very critical point. Develop a broad reading culture. Start working. Let your reading also be informed by the types of organizations you want to work for. So already, even while you're at university, already start planning your career trajectory. Say maybe dream big. I would say dream very big. Some people would say, well, I want to work for the IMF one day. I want to work for the World Bank one day. If you want to work for the IMF, for example, or central banks, then those ones for them, their most important things they look for is macro and econometrics. Then you have to be exceptional in macro and econometrics. If you want to work for IMF, central banks, different central banks. If on the other hand you want to work for institutions like World Bank, African Development Bank, etc., institutions like that, then you have to be very good in micro. Those ones are now more micro foundations of development. Micro economic development. Of course, econometrics is still very important as well. So just to say that already start to dream big. Start to dream big and start to already identify institutions where you might want to work. At Central Bank, we've started taking entry-level staff. In fact, we recruited 130. We recruited them. They reported actually in January, 130 for the 14 departments of the Central Bank. And our number came to the research department as well. So they recruited about, yeah. So we have entry-level. From time to time, they advertise. But also, we have a one-year internship program. Used to be 6 months, but now when the new governor came in 2 years ago, he extended, he agreed, let's give these young guys longer internships. So now the internships are 1 year long. I think there's a process for recruiting new interns that's going to start very soon. So just keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the Central Bank website. That is very nice exposure. Even if you don't work in the Central Bank, eventually, it's still very nice exposure even for many other careers. But economists are also needed in many other areas. Economists are needed in the financial sector more broadly. Banks love to hire economists. Many other critical sectors of the economy like education, health, also hire economists to do very critical evaluations that you have there. If you're somebody who likes the global space, you like foreign languages, for example, you can also aspire to the UN. There are very many UN specialized agencies that hire economists, like UNDP, UNIDO, etc. Very many specialized agencies of the UN. Also the World Trade Organization, and so on and so forth. So the possibilities are unlimited. What I would say, do some research, follow your passion, aim high, be very ambitious, and work at an academic angle. Never let anyone put you down. Okay? All right, so aim very high, be very ambitious, and the sky is the limit. Of course, build complementary skills like I've mentioned. Try to become outstanding in when you have time, like during your holidays. As I've said, something I've been very passionate about. I love foreign languages, so I learned Spanish and French to a high level. So and I still keep up, still keep reading, still keep watching programs, still keep reading in those languages, and then other things that you let's say learn new softwares. Right now the world is moving a lot towards Python. Okay, Python, programming in Python, etc. So find out the new econometric softwares that are being used. Yeah. At the Central Bank, we work a lot with eViews because we do forecasting. So we work a lot with eViews and Stata as well. Stata is very good for microeconometrics, like when you're doing surveys. eViews is very good for forecasting. Also occasionally use R and MATLAB as well. So just saying build extra skills, extra techniques. Become someone who is passionate about taking many online courses. Even when I was at the university, before I joined the Central Bank, now I'm much busier, but then when I had more time, I would do like 6 Coursera courses a year, just in areas I was passionate about. Not all in economics, by the way. Some would be in economics, mostly macro and econometrics. Some would be in philosophy, just things I was passionate about. I'd take 3 or 4 courses just in philosophy, just to out of interest. And with Coursera courses, for example, you can study with some of the best professors around the world because many of them offer online courses. Their courses are free. If you want a certificate, fine, you pay something small, like 5,000 shillings or something like that. But otherwise, you can really, there are so many resources that are available. But dedicate yourself to continuous improvement, continuous growth, so that every year you should be able to say you did a number of extra things that actually helped you. Because when you go for very competitive interviews, normally it's the extra things you do that actually help you. Even in my own interview at the central bank, one of the surprising questions was, what book are you reading now? You see? So just, you don't expect that question. You think people will ask you about macroeconomics and whatever. But the guys want to see, how broad-minded are you? How do you go beyond the ordinary? All right? And in addition to that, I would say, build your soft skills. Success in the professional world is technical skills plus soft skills. Always be developing your soft skills as well. Emotional intelligence, ability to work with people, relate with people, communication skills. Yeah? So soft skills are always very, very critical, because some people are very good technically, but they can't work with other people. When they need collaboration in a team, they run into trouble. So I'd say that combination is very central as well. And it's also something you can keep reading about. Also leadership. Be ambitious, aim to be a leader of the future. And indeed you are leaders, but leadership is a science. There's a lot that's been written on leadership. Yeah. I also try to always read on leadership. I'm sharing with my teams. I have my leaders in the research department as well. We have weekly meetings. Every week I try to share an article with them as well, some new leadership article I've come across. So all these things are widely available as well. Harvard Business Review, leadership articles, or many others as well that you can get, so that you're always, so that when you come into a leadership position, then you already have some ideas about how to inspire people. Because at the end of the day, if you want to go to the next level, you have to be able to inspire people and be able to connect with people. Any opportunities you get, of course, for exciting internships, I mean, beyond the central bank, all these other institutions like IMF, World Bank, African Development Bank, all of them have internship programs as well. If you can get a chance to go to Cote d'Ivoire, maybe for 6 months, do an internship with the African Development Bank or something, it will tremendously broaden perspectives that one has. So those are just a few ideas that I would share, but I would just say, aim for excellence, keep improving. One more that's occurred to me, negotiation skills. Life is a giant negotiating table. You are always negotiating in one way or another. Whether you're negotiating for a job or an opportunity, whether you're looking for a spouse. Even when you're looking for a spouse, you need a lot of negotiation. You think if you're a poor negotiator, you'll get anywhere. You need to be a very avid negotiator. So build your negotiation skills. Negotiation is a science, so you can read a lot about building those types of skills as well. I'll share a few articles with the president of the association. That's Marion. She'll write me an email, and then I'll leave my contact with her, and I'll share a few articles. I used to give when I was teaching at the university, I used to give articles, like career development articles, to my students. I would share. So I have a batch of them. So I'll share some of them, and you can get them from Marion. Yeah. One on managing oneself. There's one on managing your boss, etc., etc. Just different things for careers, on emotional intelligence. So I used to share like 10 articles with my students, typically undergrad level, to be able to work. But keep reading, keep growing, and let's make our country a better place. Let's make our continent and our world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You can do better than that once again. You can do better than that once again. We depend on that once again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Robert. That was so, the sentiment, that was so impactful. And I believe everyone has something. So we're going to the Q&A session. And I will request that we have the first three, let me say the first three. I was told two. Now I'll say the first three. I'm a person of justice. And I'm negotiating for you. Clap for me. So since I've negotiated the first three individuals, okay. Now this is what we'll do. There's a question there. Just raise your hands. I've done negotiating skills, so I have to be very smart in this. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, these are the ground rules. Number 1, if a question has been asked, no asking. Are we together on that? Are we together? Number 2, only ask one question. Then you feel that is very funny. Are we together up to that point? So only ask one question, be brief. I'll give you 45 seconds. And when I say 45 seconds, if you see me standing or just doing like this, stop talking. Okay? So frame it well. So I'm giving you time to frame your question. So we'll start from here. So you frame your question, 45 minutes times 7. How many minutes are those? 45 seconds times 7. Roughly, we make it 5 minutes, okay? So we'll start from him.
So, good afternoon. We want So, first of all, I must recognize that having conversations from the city takes a good somebody who is interested in development. I appreciate the My question though lies here, the situation part of it. Well, the situation has been slowing down. Some of the commentators